Bullies cornered a waitress in a diner, but they never expected who walked in next. It was one of those long, quiet afternoons when the sun hung heavy over Dusty Ridge, the kind of day when the air felt still enough to hear your own heartbeat. The diner windows were open just a crack, letting in the dry heat and the faint sound of horses stamping their hooves outside. I was wiping down the counter for what felt like the 100th time, trying to keep busy, trying not to think about how small my world had become. I'm Clara Mae, waitress at Miller's Diner. The only diner for miles around. Folks say I've got a smile sweet enough to calm a storm, but the truth is, that smile's just my way of hiding. Ever since Daddy passed and the ranch went under, I've been doing what I can to get by. Tips, small talk, and strong coffee, that's my life now. But that afternoon, trouble walked in. The bell above the door jingled, and two men came swaggering through like they owned the place. They weren't regulars. You could tell by the way they looked around, like they were measuring what they could take and what might put up a fight. One wore a gray tank top that showed off his sunburnt arms, and the other had a red plaid shirt hanging loose, half unbuttoned, half drunk. "Afternoon, sweetheart," one of them said, leaning over the counter. "How about a smile for a couple of lonely travelers?" I kept my tone even. "Coffee's hot. Pie's fresh. That's all that's on the menu today." They chuckled, but it wasn't a kind laugh. It was the kind that prickles the back of your neck. I poured their coffee, trying to keep distance, but they weren't interested in the food. "You work here all alone, darlin'?" the man in plaid asked, his eyes crawling over me in a way that made my stomach twist. "I can handle myself," I said, even though my voice trembled. The diner was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the slow tick of the wall clock and the low hum of the ceiling fan spinning above. There were no customers left, no help coming, and I knew if I showed fear, they'd only feed off it. But then one of them reached across the counter and grabbed my wrist. "Now don't be like that," he said. His grip tightened. "We just want to talk." I tried to pull back, but he wouldn't let go. My breath caught, and for a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. "Let her go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He smirked. "Make me." Just then, the bell above the door rang again, and everything stopped. The air shifted. Even the sunlight seemed to change. 5 men stood in the doorway, all dressed in worn leather vests and dusted boots, their shadows stretching long across the diner floor. They weren't strangers. Not to me. The one in front, broad-shouldered, rugged, and calm, met my eyes first. Jack Rawlins. It had been 2 years since I'd seen him, since he rode out of town after my daddy's funeral, promising he'd be back when he'd made something of himself. Now here he was, staring down 2 bullies like they were coyotes caught in a chicken pen. "Is there a problem here?" Jack asked, voice low and steady. The man in plaid dropped his hand from my arm, trying to act casual. "Just talking to the lady." Jack stepped closer, his boots echoing slow and heavy against the tile. Didn't sound like talk to me. Behind him, the other bikers, old ranch hands turned riders, spread out like a wall of quiet thunder. One of them leaned on the jukebox, another crossed his arms. None of them said a word. They didn't have to. The bullies looked at each other, unsure now, their bravado crumbling. Then Jack's eyes met mine again. There was something soft in them, something that hadn't faded with time. "You all right, Clara?" he asked. I nodded, though my throat was tight. "I am now." He turned back to the men. "Then I suggest you pay your tab and get out." They muttered curses, tossed a few crumpled bills on the counter, and hurried out the door, the bell clanging behind them like a final warning. The silence that followed felt like the first breath after a storm. Jack stayed still for a long moment, watching the door, then looked back at me. "You shouldn't have to fight off men like that alone," he said. "I've been alone for a long time," I whispered. He stepped closer, the smell of leather and dust mixing with the faint scent of coffee. "Not anymore." I didn't know what to say. My heart ached, not from fear, but from everything I'd kept buried. He smiled, faint and tired. "I heard what happened with your daddy. I'm sorry I wasn't there." Tears stung my eyes. "You said you'd come back." "I did," he said softly. "Took me longer than I hoped. but I'm here now." The afternoon light shifted, spilling gold across the diner floor. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant rumble of thunder. Jack turned toward the door. "Me and the boys are riding through town for a few days. Thought I'd stop by, maybe see if you'd still make that apple pie I used to talk about." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd let out in months. "It's cooling in the bag, if you want a slice." He smiled, and just like that, the years melted away. As I poured him a cup of coffee and handed him a plate, I realized something. The world might still be hard and lonely, but maybe I wasn't meant to face it alone anymore. That night, after the diner closed and the lamps went dim, I stood by the window, watching the last light fade over the prairie. Jack was outside, leaning against his bike, talking with the others. He looked up once, caught my eye, and tipped his hat. And in that small, wordless gesture, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Sometimes, the people who walk back into your life don't come with promises or poetry. Sometimes they just come when you need them most, and that's enough to change everything.